Alrighty, good morning, everyone. This is Coffee, Tea, and Politics 101. As you guys have heard plenty of times with me that I've talked about, we're literally drinking coffee as we're having our discussions on the show, and I'm learning about my wonderful guests that not everyone drinks coffee with me. So, this morning we're going to introduce the family court process. I have Judges Lopez and Brown here to discuss, what it is to bring a petition for custody into the court system and kind of the process that happens with either settling or going to trial, going through the temporary order process, and kind of some of the things that can go on with these proceedings. So, good morning, and thank you for coming on the show.
Good morning.
Alrighty, so Judge Lopez, if you don't mind, if you can introduce yourself for the guests and kind of give them your background and how long you've been here in Dallas County as a judge.
I've been a Dallas County District Court judge for 10 years.
Okay.
So yes, I was practicing law for about 13 and became a judge, and it's been an interesting experience because the first couple of years I was on the bench. I've not been on the bench as long as Judge Brown here, but I felt like a lawyer on the bench for the first year or two. And I think I've kind of evolved into being a judge on the bench. So it's a little. I didn't know there would be a difference, but to me, it's been an eye-opening difference.
So why did you feel like a lawyer on the bench for the first year?
It was easy because I was a lawyer.
Okay. Okay.
And I just brought my lawyer stuff, and I sat on the bench as a lawyer listening, and I recognized, that I wanted to hear every argument, every objection, and counter objection, and I wanted to flesh everything out. And as a lawyer, that was the way you do things. And as a judge, I realized, wait a minute, this kind of interferes with a trial. If there's all these objections going on, let's some of these objections sound good, but they don't have any real basis. And
Understood. Okay.
And a lot of times people put objections to interrupt the other side, to disrupt the flow of the trial, it can be very problematic.
Oh, okay, because I've had criminal judges on and attorneys on, and I've had other civil judges and attorneys on, and I've never heard that side of how proceedings can go with just objecting just for the sake of objecting.
Sure, they just want to stop the other person from talking if it's sounding too bad, and if you can object, even if it's spurious, then you have stopped the flow.
It doesn't have any merit to
and sometimes the other side then forgets where they were. It can fluster. It's very, it flusters everyone. You got a rule, and then if people argue, then you've done what you wanted to do, and sometimes maybe the other side forgets what question they were on and moves on to something else.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Pro se's, because pro se's are in the court a lot.
Okay.
They come in and they hear things that they disagree with, and they object. And then they object, and they say, well, what's your legal objection? Well, there's a disagreement. They disagree with what's being said. They're lying. That's not what happened. Wait a minute. That's not a legal objection. So you're overruled if you don't have a legal, and pro se's just don't know the right legal objections to make. And there's some they should be making, but they don't know.
Okay.
And so.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that because I know pro se happens more with the family courts than necessarily with the other types of, the civil cases and criminal cases. So, and Judge Brown, can you speak about your background and introduce everybody to you?
Sure. Well, I've only been a district judge for a year, and this is the end of my second year of my first term. Thanks. But before that, I was a family law associate judge.
Okay.
And I did that for about 19 years.
Wow.
And then I love that job, and because as you know, the family courts, seems like you may already know that they divide the workload, in that the associate judges are really hear all the temporary orders generally, and then it comes to the district judge for final trial.
Right.
So you are more, we like to think of it more like an emergency room. If you compare it, it's more, the associate judges are more like the emergency room doctors who field, we see a case, can see it very early on as an associate judge,
Okay.
within the first 2 weeks.
Right.
Because obviously, if someone files for divorce, they may still be living together, still parenting their kids, and they're in a
Okay.
situation where they need help right away. So
Right.
you have to act quickly. So it's
Okay.
more like a triage situation sometimes.
That's a great, description of it.
And it's very stressful
I
and
can imagine
hands-on, and you've got a lot of people that you're trying to balance their needs and just prioritizing. So it's a different job, even though we hear the same cases. We hear different parts of them. So as a district judge, it's been it's less of that volume.
Okay.
People have been in the system a little bit longer
Okay.
generally, and then
Mhm.
if they're coming to final trial, and you get to help them, you still get to help people solve the situation or
Okay.
resolve their problems, but it's a different, we do exactly different things. So I had to kind of learn some new stuff from
Okay.
being the district judge, but it's been a really good transition, and I'm enjoying it.
Great. I know I had Associate Judge Monica Purdy on for the civil side, and she kind of described the Associate Judge role as kind of being the gatekeeper for the district judges and kind of taking care of some of those parts that don't necessarily need the district judge to look at. It's just smaller items that can be ruled on or dealt with to either remedy the situation and not lead to the final courts, or kind of put some things in place while that process is kind of building up to go to the final courts.
That's definitely true. But with family law, obviously, you've got those. I feel like we have more emergencies than,
Okay.
because just like a temporary restraining order is it's a common thing in family law.
Sure.
Because you have to get things done
Mhm.
right away. You have to make some changes. So sometimes you have to make a call right away at the outset, just based on one person's side, because they've
Sure.
come and need help, and then you have to wait a week or two to get both people's sides.
Okay.
And sometimes because of scheduling, you've got to wait a little bit longer. So you're constantly putting Band-Aids on things to try and sort it out, so that you can finally, you can hear and make a decision about what's to happen in the interim before they get to final trial. And then that's where that comes in, that you might decide that someone needs they need to have a custody evaluation, or
Sure.
they need to put in place parameters for access and possession of kids, and who's going to live in the house, and who's going to pay bills, and who's going to drive what car,
Okay.
and that kind of thing.
Oh
So
wow, it gets very detailed.
Well-
It gets granular like that.
absolutely,
Oh,
because
my.
if you're still sleeping with the person that you need to get, in the worst case, you need to get protection from, something
Right.
bad has happened,
Right.
you've got to act quickly. And so
Oh
the
wow.
calls are extremely important, obviously, because
Mhm.
you've got to really try on it with not any, very little outside information, just with the two parties, to try to sort out what the truth is. And really, that's the truth. That's our job, right? That's our
Right,
goal, and we
right.
try hard, but it's unfortunately, people have lied before. Have you ever had that happen?
Lie, they shade the truth, they put the
Well,
spin on things, and
Yes,
that's-
and I know we briefly spoke about smoking mirrors, and so just your speaking about that. So just kind of want to take people through. I am petitioning for custody, so I'm entering my paperwork, as you say, but legal terms, I'm petitioning for custody of a child, children. I'm filing for divorce, and that gets entered in, and then we go before an associate judge to get temporary orders put in place, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so at that point, a claim is made for custody, and just bringing up, some difficult situations, or just an easy situation that we've just decided that we're not working anymore, and we're not at odds with each other, but we just feel like, we've grown apart. So with the easy to the most difficult and everything in between, how is it decided to go ahead and set the temporary orders, and who's going to be the custodial parent of children during that time?
Well, if you,
You know, I'll tell you this. I've had a unique experience because
Sure.
I've been a district court judge longer than her, but I've practiced in front of her when she was
Oh, wow.
an associate judge, so I
Yes.
know her in that respect. And
Yes.
so, you know, if it's and I do know temporary orders, but I know not like she does because she lived it for 20 years. So you know what? I'm going to defer that to Judge Brown.
oh, it's easy.
Okay, so now he's putting you on the spotlight now.
Well, you know, the easy cases though, that you say, the easy cases, those people, if we're working out, we're husband and wife and we've already, we're not gonna, the example you gave, we're calling it quits, I'm gonna say, well then why don't we just do what we've been doing? But you know, you get that little apartment downtown and you can, you know, have the kids every other week and we'll just switch off. Or better yet, you have them every day after school and I'll keep them when let's put it, my favorite way to solve the problem is that because these things travel in pairs. So when you say you're going to file for custody, if you're the mother or the father of the children that we're talking about, then there's always two people, and they're both going to have. I mean, there is
they're going to have their emotions involved.
Custody. Well, and there's no such thing as like I'm going to get custody. I mean, we use that term. Lay people, but really, you're both parents, and you're both going to. The main thing is just trying to figure out when they're going to spend time with each parent. And what works for the family. So in my years, I would always just try to get people to figure out what works, and if they're having trouble, then I can say, then let's have your work schedule, and then give you. I mean, both people put their work schedules down, and say it's Judge Lopez and I, and he works nights and I work days. It's a perfect solution,
right?
Because if I work days, then I can have the kids at night, and he can have them during the day and do the day
and
tasks.
He can drop them off at school and pick them up beforehand,
and do homework, and then I can get them and do bath and bed, and we can divide the chores like we've been living our life for 3 years. Because that's really what we've been doing, and that's the least disruptive to the kids.
Right.
Because ultimately,
it's about the children.
It is about the kids, and it's bad enough that the two people they love the most are going to break up.
Right.
And it's not their fault, but they're the ones who have to suffer the consequences.
Yes.
Now they got to go sleep on a couch at Dad's little
apartment.
efficiency, and where's the dog going to go? And their lives are messed up.
I've seen people go into Bonkersville over pets. So it's interesting.
And when they're when the kids are with dad, then they're missing mom, and when they're with mom, they miss dad, and it's I try to get people to realize that it's to take the stress away, to say, look, it's really about this. You're not going to lose you're always going to be their mother. And you're always going to be their dad, or you're always going to be their mother, and you're always going to be their mother. These are the two people you guys have. This is it, and you bring different things to the table. No need to fight over it. Let's just figure out what works, where you can both love your kids and they can feel secure, and the less stress, the less fighting, the better it is for them.
Right.
So, and of course I always encourage people to not have a lot of. I mean, the best cases are the ones who never look at their decree. They just do what works for them. But those are, as I know, those are not the ones we see. So the ones that work it out.
Okay.
And the ones that can't work it out, obviously, are the ones that come to us. And as I said about that temporary orders phase, you kind of sort that out as time goes on, and the more needy people. You realize, they come back. You see them again and again because they're different roadblocks come up and different problems, and maybe things intensify. So those are the sad, difficult ones, and it really takes time to sort out. When people come in for temporary orders, it's your first time to see them, and as the associate judge dockets are really loaded, maybe 10 cases in one docket, and they're going to show up at 9 o'clock, and you've got to address every case and figure out what's going on and who prioritizes the hearings. so that maybe you can only hear 2 people that day, but
Sure.
if you hear 2 cases, they don't get a lot of time.
Right.
So you may be limited in your time to present your case. So if I'm gonna make a life decision for you, for a
Right.
couple in front of
Right.
me, I've only known them, that time they're
In front of you.
right, and if they have lawyers, their lawyers may not let them talk much. You hear a lot
Right.
of words from the lawyers, and the
Okay.
lawyers are not going home with the kids. So
Right.
you've got to still boil down the time that I get to look at each parent to listen and figure out who's telling the truth or who's, because obviously they have 2 different stories,
Sure,
or we wouldn't
sure.
really have a disagreement,
Sure.
right? So it's difficult to do that, and with time, but by the 3rd time maybe we've spent a morning together, sometimes you start to get a feel for more, I mean, you get to know people a little bit better.
Okay.
So, but it,
And that can happen during the temporary order phase? Because I've heard, just through talking to people who've gone through this process, various things can happen. And so, especially with claims being made about abuse or molestation or neglect. And I've seen Judge Turner in action. I've watched him, and there was a difficult couple in front of him, and he just, I'm gonna end this madness. You have your primary, you pick up from the child from the school, y'all don't ever have to see each other because I don't want to hear this. And I was just like, wow. It was like he just nipped it in the bud, and it was like, and I think that couple, it was their first time before the judge, and I'm just going off of memory and observation, but it was just, you know, talking to other judges about, you know, some of the drama that can happen. It's like you hear cases all the time, and you can kind of pick up where people are going to interact, and it's going to be one of those kind of difficult situations. And just trying to make that immediate call to try and minimize the drama. So if someone is making those claims, do you have a hearing during the temporary order phase to make sure that you're putting the kids with the right parent during that time? Or does that happen, I guess, is the question.
Well, claims of abuse and neglect, those things have to be heard quickly. You don't want those to just be reset for another time. And if there's an emergency hearing, some of those who have facts that are more perhaps dangerous to the children
Sure.
have to be heard quickly.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and sometimes you have to err on the side of caution and put in parameters in place and investigate situations.
Sure.
But meantime, you have some restrictions because these allegations have been made. You're not gonna, once you, even if you have the hearing, he said, she said,
Right.
then what do you do?
Right.
And you've gotta it takes time for for the outside investigation to go on, and for also you to get to know what's going on. But
Right.
that's what I was gonna say. I guess if one person is feels like they're with a pathological liar or an domestic violence situation, I know people get frustrated because they're like, he's lying, he's done the
Right.
XYZ,
Right.
he
Right.
hits me,
Right.
or
Right.
she stole, unplugged she's like deflated my tire, she does all these things. I just met both people, I
Sure.
don't know, so you show me evidence, yeah, your tires were flat, I don't know who
Who did
you don't
it,
know who
right.
did it. So, that's why I say the process in the worst cases, we try to get to the bottom, but it does require more, coming back, you do have
Okay.
to come back more, so.
Okay.
I guess sometimes there's some orders put in place, and then the one I was speaking to was more like
Sure.
a case that continues to come back after
Mhm.
you've made a decision
Mhm.
on temporary,
Mm-hmm.
the Band-Aid, or even a bigger, then it doesn't, if they keep coming back, it's like
Mhm.
the squeaky wheel, you kind of have to wonder, okay, so, and we have cases like that on final that keep coming back. They've never been out of court. They got divorced 3 years ago, and they're still
I've heard
back.
cases like that that keep going on and on and on.
And sometimes I just think, you have to figure out, because there are a number of factors that could be. It could be
Sure.
that you got it wrong, and that it just isn't a good solution.
Mhm.
It could be that there's mental illness involved on the part of anybody. I mean, it could be that there's a lot of things. I'm always
Sure.
thinking, well, did I get it wrong? We need to figure this out.
Right, right.
And it's often hard with lawyers involved and with money. Then it's difficult to get to the bottom sometimes, because if I just have two people in front of me that are
Right.
representing themselves, we can just have the hearing, talk about what's going on, and we can kind of get to the bottom
Sure.
more easily. But if
Sure.
you have attorneys who ask for continuances, and they
Right.
can sometimes delay things. I mean, attorneys are great, don't get me wrong. I want to have them in the cases. It
Right.
makes it easier.
Right.
But it also, if I'm an attorney and this is my client, and it's not going to do any good if the judge hears him talk, because the first thing he says is going to be not good for the judge. So I'm just going to try
Right.
to keep him from talking, and I'm
Right.
going to make the other side jump through all the hoops so that we can
Okay.
try to delay this as long as I can, or
Sure.
whatever, because he's got the kid.
Right.
So I don't know. There are all different objectives of the different moving parts, and our piece is to really
Kind of sort through it all.
try to find
Go
out
ahead.
something.
I just want to comment on something
Sure.
she said just now. She just said something that attorneys make it easier. And what the attorneys do make it easier because they do a better job of presenting the case.
Okay.
And pro se's come in and they really don't know how to put evidence before the court, gather evidence, give us the facts that we need to know to be able to make the right decision. Right. Sometimes they come up there and they're just like, yeah, I'm here for trial, and
Oh, wow.
okay, so I have to become the person to do the investigation by asking the questions, because very few of them come ready
Educated
to present
and
anything.
to present.
So
Okay.
lawyers help in that respect.
True.
They do.
Okay.
They do in a better presentation.
Sure.
They object to things that really probably should be objected to, where pro se's
Okay.
don't. So
Okay.
makes a big difference.
I can see that.
Mhm.
So, one question, and just kind of talking about how long things can go. How long are temporary orders?
Well, they're in place until another order gets made.
Okay.
So temporary orders are more flexible, because you have to have grounds to modify them. You keep
Okay.
changing them.
Okay.
Something has to have changed, pretty much. But cases can go on. Unfortunately, they can go on a really long time, like a year, 2 years. It just depends, and it's not really. Yeah, it's a combination of factors, so
Okay.
they can drag on. And
Okay.
of course, and outside. If you've ordered things, say a social study and a custody evaluation's been ordered, those
Oh,
can
yeah,
take,
I've heard those can take a very long time.
and if you go through family court services, they do a bang up job, and they're way less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the route you have to go, it's 6 to 8 months maybe before you get your full thing, and your full
Okay.
study, but it also is dependent on how soon people could come up with the money.
Sure.
The fee is set by statute. It's 2% of each party's annual net resources. So,
Okay.
with a minimum of $250 and a maximum of $2,500. So, mine are always more in the $250, or
Sure,
waiving
sure,
some of that
sure.
fee, or the $300 range, maybe to 5 to 8, and it takes a long time for them to get the money to
Sure.
pay that
Sure.
to make it move forward, so
And
they
then-
can even start.
If they miss appointments, also it
Oh.
prolongs it even further.
Oh, wow.
Right,
Oh,
just
wow.
makes the whole thing even longer than it needs to be.
Wow. Oh gosh. Okay. So, yeah. So then, I do want to talk about custodial parent rights versus non-custodial parent rights, because there can be some friction with couples that are going through divorces or custody battles, as I just call them. Just kind of knowing some of my friends, and I have a lot of guy friends, so I've heard like the worst of the worst that can happen to me in these situations where they're just like, it felt like they were hung out to dry, because Texas is notorious, or has been called, a mother's state. So yeah.
I had lady come up or some guys come up and said that during the trial. I had to stop him in his tracks and say, no, that does not apply. I don't know where you get that, but I can guarantee you it's not going to apply in this court.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah.
kind of talk about what's the difference as far as responsibilities, I guess, I'll say, versus rights for the person who is called the primary caregiver for the kids versus the parent that the kids have visitation with?
Well, the only two big things that I see at that
Uh-huh.
point with it, we're talking about the primary parent, the one, that parent has the right to decide, designate the residence of the child.
Okay,
And essentially the right to receive and give receipt for child support. All the other rights actually could be joint in exercised independently, or the court could give all those rights to the primary parent,
Okay.
depending on the circumstances. But
okay,
the legislature intended that some of the parents, both parents, would have an active participation with regard to all those other rights.
okay,
But a non-possessory parent, asleep at the wheel, could end up saying, well, she can have all the rights, or he can have all the rights, and all of a sudden the primary parent has all the exclusive rights. There is another thing. If
Sure.
there's been a history of pattern of family violence,
right,
and the person who's been the victim, generally,
Mhm.
pursuant to the statute, doesn't share those rights with the person who was the aggressor.
okay,
So that person in that circumstances generally would get all the sole rights, the right
Okay.
to make all those decisions without having to confer with the person on the other side who is the abuser.
okay,
So there are some circumstances where those rights just go to the person who is the primary exclusive.
When VICA code says that, like if we find there's been a history or pattern of family violence,
mm-hmm,
you may not appoint the parties as joint managing conservators, which is what you guys are talking about, right? Joint
sure,
managing.
sure,
Because joint managing conservatorship is that you share everything except, it's true, one person gets the right to the primary right to establish the children's residence,
Which
primary
influences school
residence, sorry. Right.
choices and whatnot, okay,
And so really, those are the fight, and says that then they can get child support,
okay,
essentially. But those are the ones to fight over. If you're gonna be joint managing conservators, those are the things that, I mean, the primary one that everyone calls it primary, just means they get the right to establish the child's primary residence.
okay,
So it's just about for fixing where they go to school, really, if you think about it. And possession schedule is kind of what determines whether or not child support would be paid or not. But yes, if that happens and they agree to standard possession, or
Sure.
that's what you get, then the person who's gonna be, somebody's gonna pay child support
Sure.
generally.
and standard possession, just for
Yes.
lay people catching the show, what exactly does that mean? Because I've talked to quite a bit of you guys, so I understand some of the lingo, sometimes I don't. And I just want to make sure that my audience
Right.
understands, yes, what that means.
Well, the legislature has put together a default provisions
Okay.
for visitation for a party who's not the primary, and the default provisions generally are the first, third, and fifth weekend.
Okay,
Looking at the first, third, and fifth Friday of every month,
okay,
6 p.m. Friday to 6 p.m. Sunday,
okay.
and
And there's also extended, correct, where it's an additional day during the week that the non-custodial parent gets to have?
well, standard possession includes a Thursday from 6 to 8.
Okay,
But you can expand the visitation to give somebody the right to pick up a child Thursday after school and return the child to school on Friday morning,
okay,
pick the child up on their weekend, Friday after school, and possibly even return the child on Monday morning at school.
okay,
So
okay,
it's a little bit broader, it's not
Okay.
broader, and
Okay.
it gives more time and more equally
More
to the
time,
parties.
yeah.
okay.
But it does require more cooperation.
And
Yes.
the thing
Yes,
is
sir.
that when you were talking about designating the residence,
Mm-hmm,
a parent who is trying to play the other parent,
yes.
they may live in Dallas, but then they decide, look, I got the right to decide, I'm going to move far away.
I've heard about that, where you're moving to the tip of
Right,
the edge
I'm
of
going to
the
move far
county.
away. Now that
Yes.
other parent can't exercise expanded standard because there's
It's too
traffic
long.
to go over to pick
Right.
the child up, and it just creates all these other issues.
Oh, wow,
See,
yes,
one of the things that happens in family cases is that there's this big emotional component in these cases that people get really emotionally hung up and they're
Mhm.
upset with the other side.
Mhm.
You know, so right. So a lot of times it happens in these kind of cases that you may have one parent having a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and that ended the relationship. So the other parent is upset with that parent who did
Sure.
that. So they want to say, well, you did that. You're not really thinking about these kids. I don't think
And
you should.
trying to use it as leverage.
Right, and you know, one of the distinctions we make in family courts, you can be a bad spouse, but a great parent.
Right,
So, and people litigating in court don't see that.
right, right, right.
So it's there's a lot of moving parts.
Okay, so I did want to bring up, it's just doing some research and talking to some agencies, the Family Place and Genesis, where they're dealing with parents and children that have been involved in very stressful homes where there has been abuse. And I know I talked to Darlene Ewing during a candidate forum about this, where a lot of times, typically women that are being abused take 7 attempts to finally leave. And so there's a lot of emotional and mental damage that has happened in, unfortunately, staying in those types of relationships. But the father rights group movement has given some abusers a platform to try and use the court system as a means of institutionally abusing their partner, especially if she's moved on with someone else, or she finally got the courage to move away from her abusive partner, or the abusee, not to put a gender with it because it can happen on both sides. The abusee has finally left the situation and is trying to get back on footing and do the right thing by the kids and removing them from a nasty situation. But there are tactics that have been, that I read up on, that have been encouraged by some of these groups to use the court system as a whipping post for the partner because they left. So things like fighting for residents and feeling like they're not in control anymore because they're not getting to choose the school that the kids are going to. A big motivator that I saw was not wanting to pay child support. So they're coming out with claims of the abusee abusing the kids, calling CPS and making frivolous reports to try and make that person look like they're the abuser, trying to say that the abusee is mentally unstable, or when I talked to Genesis, it seems like using the word bipolar was real popular with these kind of tactics to show that the abusee is mentally unstable and is not fit to take care of the parents. So then comes in all the contentiousness that can definitely happen with these cases. So can you talk about trying to minimize, or situations where that has played out and the abusee ends up getting abused by the system?
Wow.
I know that's a big.
Hopefully that hasn't happened so much, but obviously, just coming to court, you've got to get orders. You've got to come to court. The shelters are that you name are really good at enveloping the victim in services, kind of, and even legal services, and getting them to court and getting the right information before the court. But it does happen. You know, also we've all been educated enough, hopefully, about the domestic violence that we are more understanding of traditional victims are in a bad way, and not always. That's why the legislature took it out of the court's hands and said, if you if you find this, you cannot make them joint managing, you cannot make them try to make decisions with their abuser.
Sure.
That just gives them more control and power. So in most cases, I mean, if truly it's clear what's going on, then you can try to strip the powers, make sure that you strip all the powers from someone who you feel is really abusing the system and abusing their partner and the kids. And there are ways to figure that out, but that's one of those situations that takes a little bit of time. You might not, the first time they come in, you may not know if there are counter allegations and they know the buzzwords to use. And those are conclusions, and they're not, you have to just get down to what really are we talking about, what's happened, what are the facts.
Sure.
Let's hear. And it's one of those situations where sometimes you may not catch it until things continue to percolate, and if they're coming back to court, then you might begin to see,
see a pattern developing. Okay.
Maybe, and it's just a matter of getting to know the parties, and also getting the objective third party kind of studies, which we sometimes we have to rely on, or those things can help identify. I mean, they can just help be one other piece of a puzzle we're trying to put together. So if someone, to determine if someone is making things up or what's really going on.
Right. I guess I had a girlfriend that kind of went through a situation where her ex had moved on, and they broke up, and she was fine with the breakup. And all of a sudden, he started calling CPS all the time to try and say that she was being neglectful and that she was being abusive. And CPS kind of caught on to it and said, we're marking, your case, and we're not going to take any more calls because we see what's going on. But then I've talked to people and attorneys who've represented people and also some social workers from outside the state, that sometimes when CPS gets involved, you're labeled based on the call. And even though you are fine with them coming in and talking to you and interviewing you, and you have this, I don't have anything to hide, that can hurt. Especially if there are repeated calls being made, and even though abuse is never found, you're still being looked at through that lens of being an abuser. So they're trying to find the abuse versus saying, something's not adding up here, and doing further investigation on why the claims are being made.
Well, of course, CPS is not, rarely involved in our cases. Yeah, there may be a call, but CPS, I know people think that CPS, that if you're relying on CPS to protect your children from the other parent, that's a bad situation to be relying on, because you as a parent or you as a grandparent you're the first line. I mean, you've got to do what you need to do to protect your kids. If you're relying on CPS, who has, those caseworkers, they're overworked and underpaid, and they're trying to save lives of kids. So they're not going, it's unfortunate when they get involved in in a divorce situation. In fact, sometimes they will just stand back and not get involved, because it's not their priority. This isn't a life or death situation. We're talking belt marks or something that's just not as, they're going to label it and get out of there. They cannot spend their time waiting in the hallways of the courthouse for 3 hours to get to a hearing to say, oh yeah, I saw
I saw some marks because somebody got a spanking or something. They're looking for very immediate danger, it sounds like.
Well, that's their job, is to prioritize and to just go to really protect kids, not make the calls on the everyday level on squabbles. And I'm not saying obviously, if it comes down to that, you need to, if you're afraid that your child's in danger and you're limited in your rights because of the
Sure,
court
sure.
of an order, you've got to do what you got to do. And if you had a
Right.
CPS, you have to do it. But I don't see that much. I mean, obviously, sexual abuse allegations,
Sure.
which were really, have always been a thing since time immemorial. I mean, that's what you can do. And generally, it's moms, right, make a claim of sexual abuse against the
Right,
dad.
that's what I did find in my research, yes.
And that's a kind of a thing that, to a man, especially to be falsely accused, that's the hardest thing in the world, because
Right.
you can't prove a negative. I mean, it's
Right,
so
right,
difficult.
right.
So they've just thrown that out there, and for whatever reason, and they're usually, of course, if there really is sexual abuse, the difficulty is if you have a 3-year-old child who's not completely verbal, and you say that she was that she made some statement in the bathtub to you,
Right.
then we're off and running. Like, Daddy did
Right.
this to you, and those were the really most difficult cases to
Because
figure
I could
out.
see that being very stressful to the child, having them have to talk to someone.
They
Even
can.
even if, let's say, my dad really was doing it, and I'm 13,
Oh,
and I can verbalize and have the dialogue with you, and I can give you details, but that's still going to be incredibly difficult and stressful for me. So I can only imagine, a claim like this being made against someone, and the child is like 4 or 5 years old, where their articulation isn't there, and putting them through more stress.
When things get really bad, like in a family court like that, and I've had 2 parents before me, one saying that person is unfit, that one saying this one's unfit. Generally, the court would appoint somebody to represent the interests of the child.
Okay.
So that third lawyer or that guardian, that amicus, then would champion to find out, to try to get down to the bottom of this.
Okay.
Because I have a concern if placing a child with this parent or that parent, I need a
Sure.
third option, all right? Either I need to
Right.
find out who's really suited,
Telling
or
the
give
truth,
me
or-
somebody else.
Right.
Because
Okay.
I got to remove that child from a dangerous situation if both parents have deteriorated to the point that neither one of them is safe for the child to be
Right,
with.
right. Wow. I can see how this division or arm of the court system, if we're just looking between, criminal, civil, even though family courts fall under the civil umbrella, you're really a separate arm in yourself, because it seems like it can be so complex because you're making a decision like the criminal courts on someone's life, but there are criminal charges. It's still a civil dispute between 2 people, and not to minimize children, but their division of property, kind of. I mean, just to kind of put it in the most simple of terms that I can, because you're trying to make a decision on who's going to be the best to take care of them. And my gosh, you guys have an amazing job in front of you every day when people come before you.
One of the things you didn't talk about, which is
Yes,
some of the things
please.
that happens, is alienation by one parent.
Yes,
against
I was
the
going
other.
to get to that. Yes,
Right.
yes.
And that's horrible. That's horrible. That just.
So
It's the
with you
worst.
bringing that up, I looked at a page, just kind of reading through some of the nasty tactics that people have done to win custody, in a means of controlling an abused partner. That California seemed to be more ahead in judicial decisions being made more around the alienation and trying to protect the kids from being forced to make a decision on which parent to love, and having to deal with some of the emotional and mental abuse tactics that can be played on them to get them away from the parent who's really doing what's best for the kids. And one attorney that I spoke to said that Texas isn't really, that's not a cause for giving someone custody over the kids is alienation.
I don't know what that's about, but I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Okay, and that's why I wanted to talk to you guys and bring you on to speak to that, because even talking to Genesis and to some of the counselors there, that really puts the kid in a bad situation because they don't have the coping skills. And quite few adults don't have good coping skills. So children are being forced to try to survive these types of situations the best they can and try not to be in the middle. And unfortunately, a lot of parents are putting their kids in the middle. Because I've seen it from both sides, where I've had girlfriends attacking their children's father, and I'm like, he's just trying to do the best that he can. Don't beat him up because he moved on or you guys were at odds. And I've seen the same thing happen with guy friends of mine that are just like, you know, I'm going after her. I don't want to give her my money. She doesn't deserve it. And it's just like, time out. What happened to this person that you created when y'all were so in love, sort of deal? So
that's what I tell people though all the time about talking in front of the kids. For me, it's they'll say, "Well, I told them because it's true. I told them that Dad was having an affair or Mom was having an affair. I told him it's true. He did." And we're talking about a 6-year-old, or it doesn't matter. I say this. It's the one thing that will get you in huge trouble. For me, is that you guys can break up, but you've got to protect and shield the children at all costs from your fight. Because, and if you're ever in doubt, it may be the truth, but there are a lot of things we don't tell our kids, even though they're true. Like the night they were conceived. We don't talk about the details of that night. No kid, no child, no matter what age, wants to hear about their parents' sex life.
right.
Let's break it down, because really that's what started this whole thing, right? It's a
One
weird
act.
relationship.
Yes.
Well, and that's what makes it so difficult, because the whole relationship is, I mean, that's what it is, the love and what was there at the beginning, and not there anymore. That's why it's inappropriate to share the reasons for the breakup of a marriage or a relationship with your children.
Okay, so I want to take a moment. So all of my fans who are watching the page and anyone who comes on and watches this video, I do want to stress what Judge Brown is saying, and also Judge Lopez. And we're going to go back to the alienation component. It is so important to leave the children out of it. Because talking to Family Place Genesis, you're putting your child in a position where you're asking them to make a decision on which parent to love the most. And they don't understand that, because they know they have a mom and a dad, and they're both people put together in one body. And if you're talking nasty about their other parent, the other parent, you can raise a lot of doubts in this child and set them up to have self-esteem issues, poor performance in school, acting out. So it's so important to keep the adult stuff adult.
Shield them at all costs from that stuff. You just have to.
Because one, kids do not understand a breakup. They do not understand why mommy doesn't live here anymore or daddy doesn't live here anymore. They just don't understand those adult dynamics. And we're seeing too many kids who are walking around with emotional behaviors that could have not been introduced into their lives if we decided to just put them first and keep our messiness with each other out of their lives. Okay, so I'm off my soapbox. and you know, and I swear, I've had a lot of friends that right after high school, I was just one of those girls that I knew in my 20s I wasn't emotionally ready to take care of something else outside of a dog.
Mhm.
So I waited until my 30s to have a kid. One, I was in college and I wanted to complete all of that before starting a family. But I've had quite a few friends that shortly after high school or shortly after college, you know, getting married and having kids. And by the time I was, you know, contemplating starting a family and moving that direction, they were already starting to get divorced and breaking up, and then having all of those problems that can result with the fighting that can go on over custody. So alienation. So again, yes, one attorney did say to me that that is not something that the courts weigh heavily on in making a decision. So please clear the myth up and educate myself and my viewers what goes into outside of, you know, clear abuse or any criminal charges that somebody may have that can weigh in a decision. How does alienation come in with helping you shape a decision for the kids?
I'm going to throw in a couple things.
Sure.
What you said earlier about the younger parents. I think we see a lot more in family courts. A lot of more grandparents are getting involved in raising
Really?
kids. A lot more.
Well, I was raised by my grandparents. So.
So sometimes the parents are just not stable enough, don't have everything together, can't stay stable. They're just still working out their youth issues.
Okay.
And the grandparents step in and take over and raise
Wow,
these
I did
kids.
not. Yeah, I thought I was part of the last generation.
Oh,
that
no,
grandparents.
Grandparents are still
Yeah.
alive and well. thank
Okay.
goodness.
Yes. Yes.
Now, grandparents generally don't have any rights. Generally, just if you've got two parents that are fit, but
Right.
if we have unfit parents, then grandparents can step in and petition the court to get rights even to raise those kids. And one of the things that happens a lot of time, which we haven't talked about here, is that with cases where abuse, alienation, drug abuse, we want a parent to have and the legislature says continuous, regular contact with both parents. But if it's a problem, then from time to time the courts reduce the visitation time and keep reducing it, and sometimes it has to be supervised.
Sure.
And so supervised facilities are really used a lot here in Dallas County for those cases where that parent, one parent or both, aren't acting in the best interest of the child, using
wow.
drugs, violent, alienation.
Okay.
So I use supervised visitation for cases where I find that a parent is alienating and the child's being affected, and it's damaging the relationship with the other parent. And
So give me then a definition, or what are things that would be considered alienation outside of what we, in my little soapbox, with not shielding the kids on the breakup of
The reasons for the
the
breakup.
reasons
That's
for the breakup. So what are other behaviors, or I'll just call them behaviors because I'm at a loss for words to describe it any other way, that would be considered alienation?
well, one of these things we talked about, these false reports to CPS.
Okay.
We talked about false allegations of sexual abuse that don't pan out. We're talking about speaking to the child about whose fault it is that this relationship issue is happening. We're talking about writing notes to a child, perhaps that when I was a parent, well, I am a parent, but I used to write lunchbox notes to my kids. Great stuff. Parents do it. Great stuff. And as a matter of fact, my college daughter would pull one out. Look, I found one.
Aw.
But I've seen some of those come, and they're talking about, the pending family case to the child, and it just turns a child's loyalties away from that one parent to the other. And there's things that people could do that just continue to not outright, but slowly chip away at the child's relationship with the other parent.
Have you seen situations where one parent has coached a kid to say things like to a CPS person, a home study person, to support their claims? And I say that where when the kid is with this parent and talking to an authority, their story matches up on that side. And then when they're interviewed with the other parent, now the story is completely different and it's opposite. And have you seen those kinds of things happen where the kid looks like they're giving mixed things about the target parent? And is that a method of alienation?
I've seen those kind of things, yes. I have, it's troubling, but I have seen that kind of thing go on in cases, and it bothers me tremendously to see parents acting that way. And I think coaching does go on, and if it's not coaching, it's a subtle method of coaching.
Okay.
It's really subtle, that over time develops a pattern and a resentment that the child has towards the other parent, and it's reinforced by the other parent, and it's really troubling to the court because that parent clearly has lost their way as a result of hurt feelings, as a result of thinking they're winning this litigation by winning the child, and so whatever it might be, they got off track somehow, and I need to try to pull them back and get them to get some help, some parenting classes, get them to do some other things to remediate themselves, to get educated about hurting the child is hurting themselves.
Right.
And they're giving the child a fair chance to succeed in life because they're tying them down to something that is going to hurt them in the long run, because the child is both part mother,
right,
part father.
Right.
And if you attack any part of the mother, then you're attacking part of that child.
Right, right.
And that child, it does show itself in school. It does show itself in their performance. It shows itself in many ways. And the child becomes conflicted, upset, angry, acting out. And we try to help a child, put a child in therapy, to talk to somebody, to give them help. And sometimes the acts of alienation show up in these therapeutic consultations that the child has that force us to do something about it.
Wow. Now, in my research, I did find that narcissism, yes. When I read about it, it took me back because I'm not able to understand waking up with that kind of agenda every day. If we end up having a conflict with each other and we're all friends, our conflict is our conflict. If we can't work it out, okay. And we may just decide not to talk to each other anymore, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to interfere with you guys' relationship, and I'm not going to ask you to choose sides and whatnot. And it seems like with that kind of personality disorder, if that person doesn't get their way, and the best way that it was described to me is having an adult basically stuck in like a 3-year-old's mentality or a 5-year-old's mentality with it's all about me, it's all about me, it's all about me. And that playing out sometimes in court cases. So if you have a parent that suspects that may be a disorder happening, what can they do? Because from what I read about narcissism, it sounds horrible. And it sounds very terrible to be raised by a parent that has it, because if they're truly just all about them and what I've read is true, then the child is just going to be doing everything to make that parent happy, which kids shouldn't be put into a position to please a parent. I mean, I thought parents' roles were to make sure that, whatever you provided, whatever you could that was best for your children so they could succeed. So how can parents protect their children in those situations or get that truth out? If something mentally going on is happening.
The psychological evaluation is a good tool. I mean, if that's what you think.
Okay.
Then psychological evaluations can be a good tool, but one of the saving graces of
Yes.
our job and in people, you getting to know cases better, because those are the kind of things that cases that will come back and that you might see more than once. You can begin to identify that might be a problem as you get to know people. And when you see kids who are meeting the adult's needs as opposed to the other way around, or a parent who's using the child or teenage child as their best friend and telling him every detail of what dad did, that's a serious red flag. Even though they're very, very close, that's the classic example of what you're talking about. That would be really, really bad for the child, and that's why you've got a teenager. It's really bad for a teenager, much less the little kids, but all the kids will fall in line because they're extremely bonded to, attached, but it might not be as healthy attachment as you might think. But it's it's not easy. It takes time to figure out. But people, as the fictitious person you described, I say in family court, you really can't a tiger can't change its stripes. Generally, it's not going to come in and look like a zebra necessarily. You'll eventually, the truth percolates to the top, and people show their true colors. I hope eventually. It's very difficult. Even the best attorneys cannot keep me from being me if I'm, ultimately I'm going to like to talk, and you're going to know who I am one way or another. And so you just have to get that before the court enough that they know if an evaluative tool doesn't work. You've got to just keep plugging at it, I guess, to figure it out, because the truth has a way of
percolating.
I agree with that. As well.
And I've seen Judge Lopez find out at trial, because he, finally, he talked to the kids. We don't like to talk to kids. I loved kids. I'm not great at interviewing kids because
because you're so bubbly.
I love kids, right? But we won't get into my parenting. I prefer. Yeah, I'm fairly emotional as far as that goes, so it's difficult. But Judge Lopez taught me a long time ago that. That's usually the last thing we do. If we have a trial and the legislature gives us the rules say that the judge must interview a child over 12 to determine the child's wishes. Well, who wants? Why would you ever? It's a horrible situation to be in to have to ask a child to choose. That's just not a good option. That's my job.
They've been alienated from, or as I've been told from some friends, they take them shopping all the time and spend lots of money and get them, the latest and greatest on everything. So if I'm a kid, of course I want to go live with that person, but that doesn't mean that's in my best interest as a kid.
Right. Or when the mom if someone gets served with papers for a change in, 12 years old, 13 is a big age for a child to want to experience the other parent, the one they haven't been with, or the one that they've been feel abandoned by, or the one that's been, the thing with alienation is too, I see it, when cases are all or nothing, and you go from one extreme to the other, they tend to do that again. The pendulum will swing. So when adult children have aged out and have gone to live with the parent that was the super bad person at that time, and then there's just one child left, and they're trying to get that one over there. I mean, I've seen that extremism happen before,
Wow.
where they have no contact whatsoever with the other parent, and that's kind of a red flag too. Those cases, but so when I got off track, but.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
But interviewing the children is sometimes the linchpin. I mean, I've seen it happen in a case.
But that's
where,
just kind of like as a last resort
Well,
option. Or
sometimes we like to hear the facts first and know what the case is about. Otherwise, you don't know what you're talking to the kids about.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I've seen Judge Lopez unravel a whole big mess by
Oh, wow.
talking to the
To the
kid.
children, because I've heard from attorneys that that's like strongly discouraged to have the child, be called in to talk to the judge.
Well, I don't know about that. It just depends on the
The
case.
situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because
Okay.
I've had kids when they come in and I like to talk to them because they give you a perspective that perhaps you don't get in the courtroom, and
Okay.
it gives you a reference point for the facts and circumstances you've heard, and you speak to the kid. I'm not necessarily bringing a child in to take a position. I just want to hear the facts and how the relationship is with each parent. And,
Okay.
I'll tell you, most of the time,
Right.
when I have an impression of hearing a case and I go and speak to the child, when I first speak to the child, that confirms what I was going to do anyway. But on a rare occasion, I hear from a child and it changes what I was going to do.
Really?
It does on a rare occasion.
Okay.
It's a rare occasion because it doesn't happen a lot, but kids can give you a insight that you didn't have before. But the other thing is that one of the problems, and I agree, it's hard to talk to kids because they can be so emotional, and they could want to tell you that I don't want to live with this other parent, and you don't even have to ask. They would come in and they're just insisting on it, and they're crying, they're upset, and you're not really thinking that you may want to, but that's not in your best interest, So it's hard to. And I'm gonna tell you what I do is if I can't see that way and I listen to the child, I'm really talking to them about trying to convince them to go ahead and give this other parent a chance because
Oh, wow.
I try to minimize the effect of these court proceedings on the child as much as I can.
Right.
Especially when we have these issues about relocation. Oh my God, that's another whole issue. One parent, they're separated, they're divorced, and then one parent marries somebody else that has gotten a job transfer. Now they want to move out of state,
Yes. Yes.
That creates all kinds of problems because then it affects the other parent's visitation.
Right.
And then so the other
Right.
parent's visitation is being affected. Said, well, listen, I don't want the child to leave. I want custody of this child. So then
Wow.
it becomes a custody battle between the two parents about where the child's going to live, and the family is here, but the job and money and opportunities are over there now,
Right.
and so
Right.
what do you do? And the child is conflicted
Right.
because the child loves both parents, and now we have children that are very young getting on airplanes, traveling from state to state, accompanied by somebody, not accompanied by somebody. You've got to worry about the equipment, changing of flights, of planes in
Right.
the middle. They've got to
And making sure somebody oversees them, they get on the plane safely and whatnot. Oh, wow.
And buying the tickets.
Yes.
Right, get him to the airport.
Now, I will say I did hear about a judge who temporarily made the parents feel what the children were going to feel by making the children stay put in the house. And you may know about this case. And made the parents go back and forth.
We've done that. We call it nesting. I've done that a lot
Okay.
in the past of temporary orders to keep the kids' life the same and to try. I mean, like we talked about before, when the couple first comes in and wants to get a divorce, but they've been living together and they're good parents. They're both good parents, and they both want to have that. They both want their house.
Right.
And only one person can have it if they're going to break up, right?
Right.
So, on a temporary basis, we maybe to make baby steps. I would say it's a rare case where it's like that. It seems to be all or nothing. The kids in the house, all there. Make them go get an apartment together. Pick out an apartment that would be the place for each of them to stay. And then they can furnish it with the things that from the house that they need. When they're not in possession of the children, they would stay in that place.
Okay.
And this is a case, mind you, where all things are equal.
Okay.
Like no violence, no allegations of anything, just we're, maybe somebody, whatever, they just want out, the marriage is over. So
Sure,
we've got to
sure.
figure out what's best. And so during studies and during the temporary orders, maybe that's a good option because the kids can stay in school, everything can stay the
Same
same.
for them.
And parents can move in, to
Rotate
rotate
in and
in and out of the house and see how that goes, until a better solution, or until they're both, like, at least for a stage, because you've got to go through those different stages of grief.
Right.
And for someone to lose, the kids are going through those stages too.
Right.
So just to get used to being with dad here and mom's not here, that's one thing. And then for mom to be there and dad not be there, they can get used to that stage, and then maybe something else, they come up with a solution on their own. Like, we found another house nearby, we could try to lose that, and we can have these plans, try to make those decisions as a family. But those are the rare cases, because usually it's not that simple.
Not that simple. And it would be, yes, in pie in the sky, perfect world, utopia, it would be that way, where the kids would receive as minimal as disruption as possible. But unfortunately, these are very emotional times.
And you really have to take the parents where you find them and get them the help if they need help to shield the children from adult issues, or they need help in being able to co-parent.
Right.
That we try to get them to the class or to the professional
for
that will
Kids
help
Sakes
them.
class,
There's a Between Two Homes class that I
Okay.
really, really like, that just shares really child developmentally appropriate information, like simple stuff. How to even tell your kids you're getting a divorce. How to make sure that you tell them, that you make them know and feel that both parents love them. This isn't about stopping loving somebody.
Sure.
That both parents are always going to be there for them and always do what's best for them.
Right.
So that if kids are with me and they miss dad, or
That it's okay
special
to
thing,
have those feelings.
then I'll call, right.
Right.
Or then wouldn't you be able to pick up the phone and have dad,
Or
if you miss your dad,
yeah.
you can go there. Or if this is a sad thing and you want to talk to your mom or see your mom, let's call her, let's do it.
Right.
To just not feel so threatened, because the people, the parties that we see, they're going through a really horrible thing in their life anyway, generally. And so giving them the tools to help them learn and be the best parents they can be in this situation. So if they have to go to counseling, deal with the emotional issues of the breakup of the marriage, if they talk to their best friend, all those things, go do that.
Right.
But do not
Introduce
talk
that
to your lawyer on the phone with the kids in the back seat saying what horrible things happen. Don't go and we have that injunction in place where it's very standard, where you're not allowed to discuss the litigation or make disparaging remarks about the other party in the presence or hearing of the children. And I always remind people, hearing, that means if they're in your house, if they're in your possession, don't talk about it. Because they're listening. I don't care whether they're 5 years old or 15. They're in the house. They are listening. Kids know what's going on.
Yes, they do.
So if my mom can't say anything nice about their dad, then I can't control her. I can't bring the kids around her. Because if she's going to spit on the ground every time his name comes up, they pick up on that.
Right.
So I'm talking perfect world, but obviously in a perfect world, the children would not have
experience that.
They just think their parents still love each other, but they don't know. They're not together.
Right.
A vacuum is okay. In
in
that
respect.
situation, it's okay.
Okay.
But it's hard for people to do that. But I feel like they want to do the best. I feel like people want to be good parents generally.
Right.
So if we can help them get through this thing, let's do it and help them learn how to do that, because the custody evaluation definitely evaluates who is it better able to promote a relationship with both parents? And, that'll get you bad marks if you can't do that.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
And you're not gonna be a good candidate for primary, because you've got to look out for what's in their best interest, and that means that's not your best interest, it's the
Kids'
kids.
best interest.
So I
Right.
may want to do X, Y, Z, but that's not what's best for them.
Sure.
So your ability to put the children's needs first after yours, that's what being a parent is about, right?
Right. Right.
And so whatever we can do to get them to that place is
That's
what
awesome
we try
to
to do
know.
in temporary orders.
That's awesome to know that, one, there are resources. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
when you enter into a relationship and you have the surprise coming, you're not thinking about, well, what happens if this comes to an end. And it's so funny because I was talking to a girlfriend of mine about kind of going through a medical evaluation and what those processes can look like. Because I used to be a registered dietitian, and sometimes, dietitians have been called in for cases with malnutrition and whatnot. And I said, it's almost to the point where you feel like you need to consult an attorney before you make any life decisions. 'Cause, people don't know a lot. They don't understand, how these choices that they make can impact them long term. So I know that I am going to have Judge Frizzell come on, because she's a criminal judge, and talk about CPS cases that go before criminal judges for molestation, those types, yes, of cases. And also Judge Martin, Andrea Martin, is going to be on. And I've heard about talking to someone at the family place. If there's a child in the home who's being abusive to a parent and there are other children, how that puts the other children at risk, and if the parent isn't able to get better discipline and control of that child and stop that from happening, how those children could be removed. So December is all about domestic violence and how those types of cases can play out, unfortunately, before you guys in a final hearing with trying to make the best decision with children and putting them in the safest home possible. So this is going to be a big month. Judge Magnus is also coming on. He had a case with sex crimes against children. So, and just kind of talk out, those types of difficult situations and what can be done there to try to protect children. So I just want to thank you guys for coming in and talking on the show, because you've provided some great information, but it's almost like the tip of the iceberg. So please, one thing, yes, that I'm a big stand on is education, because knowledge is power, and people can make different choices if they know what is available. And I don't think a lot of parents understand how helpful the courts can be with getting resources for parents and children in difficult times. Even with the best parents going through a divorce, it's still a difficult time. And as a lay person and before becoming a precinct chair and whatnot, just with having various judges come on the show, it's been eye-opening to see like some of the specialty courts that have come about, just looking at the needs of the community and how problems can try to get ahead of the problems and do some other things to minimize those problems as much as possible. So I do want my viewers to understand that you guys are resources and not, because it is intimidating going before, when you all have your robe on, it is intimidating.
Yeah.
Whether I've known people, as attorneys and then they became judges, it's still an intimidating process. So, the biggest part that I'm trying to get people to understand is that number one, you all are human.
We are.
But you're also there's a question mark around you, I see.
One of the things that is
Yes.
overlooked here is that Dallas County is such a big place that we do have specialized courts.
Yes.
Criminal, civil, family, juvenile.
We're so
But
lucky.
you go to a smaller community,
Yes.
you get into a court of general jurisdiction, they handle all the cases
Yes,
there.
I heard about that. It was I think Collin
Collin
County.
County, Denton County.
Yes, that the judge on the bench is hearing civil and criminal, and I'm going,
Oh,
just
yeah.
on the civil end. No, I would not want to be a judge in that county, and that's a great point that you make, is that there's so many more opportunities to help provide the education and the resources and have that specialty where the judge can just focus in on that particular item. Because I had Judge Collins, Dominique Collins, on the show, and she spoke about her veterans court and making sure veterans get resources for their PTSD. And yes, they may get into trouble as a result of that, but that doesn't mean that it should be the end of the world for
Right.
them. And I just want everyone to know that you all are advocates and you have your resource to people coming before you, and not just this.
Because that's what we want, is for parents to be the best parents they can be. Be able to meet their own needs so that they can then meet their kids' needs. Because that's same in juvenile court. I mean, it's really the same. CPS cases, it's the
Yes.
same as their parents. I don't think they're automatically, I mean, they really do want to do the right thing if they may just not know it because they've never had their needs met by
Right.
their, and so
Right.
it's a process. They've
Right.
got, hopefully money's always an issue, and
Yes. Yes.
So,
yes.
low
There's never
cost
enough of it.
Yes.
services
Yes.
are really hard, but that we do have those resources, and we're
Okay.
lucky enough to have associate judges who can spend more time, because if you think their dockets are busy, if we were general jurisdiction, in Collin
Oh, I
County,
could
you get
only imagine what those judges' dockets look like.
20 minutes aside for temporary orders, period.
And then shifting from civil to criminal, and
And they gotta handle their criminal dockets in this regular, certain amount of time.
yeah, that's making me dizzy just thinking about it. And yeah,
We're lucky.
yes. So I do want everyone to know that Dallas County, has great judges that are there for the people. So do understand that, being in front of one of these guys doesn't mean the end of the world, that they're really trying to help the community, because the community is our society. And if we don't help problems that our society is facing, then those problems will just grow and just kind of get out of hand. So, the family, I feel like the family is just the foundation for everything. And
It
if
is.
we're producing, raising children in the best capacity possible, then we're not turning out the criminals. We're not turning out people with mental illnesses that could have been prevented through childhood experiences. And I've talked to so many people that they're just like, well, all the therapist wanted to do was talk about my childhood and what happened. Well, your childhood shapes the kind of adult that you become. So it's great knowing that we have judges on the bench that take so much time to understand what's going on and try to be advocates for the children, because a lot of times people don't necessarily, see the human side of guys when you're on the bench. And it's just good to know that it doesn't have to be as difficult of a situation as people make, and adults have to start being adults. We cannot take things out on each other and trying to leverage your children to get back at a partner or spouse. That you're damaging future adults. And that can shape that child into behaving the same way when they develop their own family. And the last thing that we want to do is turn out broken adults that we're then trying to fix after they've had children themselves. And so, thank you again
It's
for
been
coming.
great. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes,
Thanks
and
so
I hope
much.
that you guys are open to coming back and talking, because this, for me, is such an important mission with educating. And that's just the old dietitian in me saying, you know, if you understand what's going on, you can make better choices. And granted, you know, I was coming from a lifestyle perspective with food and exercise, but 11 years as a dietitian, the majority of the time that I spent talking to people and counseling them about their diet had to do, I mean, those same issues with food and exercise were showing up in other places in their lives. And I cannot speak enough about the judges that we have in Dallas County who are for the people and not just on the bench because it's something that they can do, or they want to have judge in front of their name, or you know, it is not about an ego. It is about being a public servant.
Yes, right.
And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Thank you.
being that public servant. So guys, always submit questions. Always reach out to me through the inbox, through Coffee and Politics 101's page, so I can present situations and questions for the guests that are on the show. So that will conclude our show today. But again, remember that families are important and the children need to be shielded and protected as much as possible, and we have advocates for the children that are going to help with that. So please put your children first, because what we are dealing with our children unfortunately can shape their behaviors in negative ways, and we want them to have the most positive experience as possible. So all right, that's our show. Thank you guys for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.